We all love a good mystery, such as a newly discovered archaeological find, or unexplainable events that occur in space. Very often, though, these events are quickly explained away by common sense or scientific analysis. But there are, however, some events and discoveries that have baffled us for a very long time that need explaining. Number 5. The Saddle Ridge Hoard is an archaeological mystery that was uncovered in February of 2013 by a couple in California. The pair, whose names are only known as John and Mary, were taking their dog for a walk on their property when they stumbled upon something that would change their lives forever. When Mary saw what looked like a tin can sticking up from the ground, they carefully excavated it to see what it actually was. At first, they thought it was filled with lead paint due to its weight, but to their amazement, they'd uncovered an actual treasure of coins. This prompted them to look for more of the tins, and they made use of a metal detector. They were shocked to find 7 more identical canisters, all filled with more of the coins. To be exact, there were 1,411 gold coins that were minted between 1847 and 1894. They inspected the coins more closely and found that they were in relatively good condition, considering that they had been buried for such a long time. The weight of the coins alone meant that they would be worth more than $10 million. This was the biggest lost treasure ever found in the history of America, and led to a great unsolved mystery, as it's not known how the coins ended up being buried on their property. What is known, however, is that the trove was buried there at the end of the 19th century, and that most of the money came from the San Francisco Mint. We also know that they were from the period of the world-famous California Gold Rush, though some of the coins were found to be from Georgia, raising more questions as to their true owners. The coins were, however, not only valuable because of their weight, but it would seem that they're in such good condition because they were never entered into circulation, making them far more valuable. If the coins were sold at face value, they would only be worth around $28,000. Some people claim that they were left there by famous outlaw Jesse James, while others think that Black Bart or the Knights of the Golden Circle may have buried them there. For now, though, their origin remains a mystery. Number 4. The unsolved mystery of the Onjikun Lake disappearance started on a bitterly cold morning in 1930. A Canadian fur trapper called Joe LaBelle was traveling near Onjikun Lake in the Northeast Territory of Canada when he needed somewhere to stay over. He had heard of an Inuit community that lived in the area and decided to head in that direction for some food and well-deserved rest. But when he found the settlement, he realized that there was no one around and that it had been completely abandoned. He searched around the village and found meals that were half-eaten, huts that were fully stocked with food and supplies, personal possessions that had simply been left behind, a fire that was still smoldering, and an abandoned, half-repaired sealskin. His first thought was that there had been some sort of conflict and that the tribe had been forced to flee. But he realized there was no sign of a struggle having taken place, and that the tribe's weapons were still there. Some unknown event had driven the tribe from this area, forcing them to abandon their settlement at a moment's notice. He decided not to stop and traveled to the nearest telegraph office a few miles away and reported the scene to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The RCMP launched an investigation, and when they interviewed a trapper named Armand Laurent and his 2 sons, the mystery only deepened. They recalled seeing a large cylindrical object in the sky that transformed into a bullet shape before heading towards the lake. When RCMP traveled to the village, they found the scene exactly as it was described, and added the horror of finding every grave in the burial ground not only opened, but empty. The headstones were neatly stacked into piles on either side of the graves, ruling out the possibility that animals were responsible. It was eventually found that the tribe had been missing for around 8 weeks before LaBelle arrived, but they were unable to explain why there was still a smoldering fire, or what had caused the people to flee, never to be seen again. Number 3. In 1518, the residents of Strasbourg, now known as France, became the victims of an event that, to this day, remains a strange, unexplained mystery. In July of that year, a female resident of the city began to dance in the middle of the street, seemingly struck by some sort of fever or possession. After some time, a group of 36 people, mostly young women, joined her and also started dancing despite the lack of any music. Onlookers expected that they would eventually become too tired to continue, but inexplicably this didn't happen. Instead, the dancing carried on for so long that it eventually attracted the attention of the Strasbourg magistrate, as well as the bishop and a number of doctors who tried to find an explanation for what was happening, but they were left baffled. By the following month, the dancing was still ongoing, and it said as many as 400 people lost their lives due to exhaustion and dehydration. Doctors started removing some of the dancers from the street for examination, but the only explanation that they could come up with was that they were suffering from hot blood, and suggested that they keep on dancing to get rid of their fevers. Some people suffered strokes, others had heart attacks, and the dancing continued into September, when the afflicted people were taken to a mountaintop where prayers were said to absolve them. Though it sounds like a made-up tale, the dancing plague of 1518 is well documented in 16th century historical documents. It was also not the only dancing plague to have taken place, as similar manias were documented in Switzerland, Germany, and Holland, though those events didn't involve as many people as the Strasbourg event. Many theories exist as to what caused the dancing plague. Historian John Walter believes that it may have had something to do with the belief at the time that Saint Vitus, a Catholic saint, had the power to curse people with the dancing plague. The superstition may have triggered a sort of mania that spread throughout the city. Others believe that the dancers were members of a religious cult, but the most likely explanation is that the residents ingested ergot, which is a mold that grows on damp rye and has been known to cause spasms and hallucinations. Number 2. On the 22nd of September, 1979, an unexplained mystery known as the Vela Incident, or the South Atlantic Flash, occurred near the Prince Edward Islands in the Indian Ocean. At 12:53 a.m., the American Vela satellite, known as Vela 10, detected a double flash, which is normally indicative of an atmospheric nuclear explosion of between 2 and 3 kilotons. The area where the flashes took place was narrowed down to between France and the Prince Edward Islands that belong to South Africa. Acoustic data collected by the Sound Surveillance System, known as SOS-US, was investigated to see whether a nuclear device had been detonated in the area. But there was not enough evidence to prove that such an explosion had indeed taken place, and United States Air Force surveillance aircraft were sent to the area between the 22nd of September and the 29th of October to investigate and collect atmospheric samples. The Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico reported that they had detected an ionospheric wave at the time of the flashes. The wave moved from the southeast to the northwest, and they described the event as nothing they had ever seen before. When the event was made public, the United States Department of Defense stated that it may have been an explosion or natural phenomenon, such as a meteor entering Earth's atmosphere, lightning, or a glint from the sun. Since no radioactive debris was detected, and there was no seismic or hydroacoustic data to corroborate this theory, it seems less likely that the flashes occurred due to a nuclear explosion. Further data retrieved from the satellite suggested that the flashes may have been a spurious zoo signal of an unknown origin. Though there is still a lot of debate about whether the double flashes were an actual nuclear event or not, especially since an affirmative answer would have some serious political implications, it's still not known what caused the satellite to report the flashes, or what may have caused them. In 2003, Stansfield Turner, the director of Central Intelligence, wrote that the Carter administration believed that the Vela detection was of man-made origin. But no hard evidence has ever been found to prove this, and it still remains an unsolved mystery. Number 1. In 2006, a man named Hawkin Nordvest uploaded a video to the internet in which he claims to have had an experience that needs explaining. While in his home, he noticed that there was a leak coming from his kitchen sink, and he decided to try to fix it himself, rather than call for a plumber. He fetched his tools and climbed under the sink, noticing that it was coming from the very back. As he tried to find the leak, which was out of his reach, he noticed that there was a light that seemed to be coming from the same area as the leak. He suddenly realized that he was able to stand up, which seemed impossible, and when he did so, he inexplicably found himself to be outside. He noticed another man standing nearby, and when he approached him, he was shocked to find out that it wasn't a stranger, but an older version of himself. At first, he didn't know what to make of the situation, but as they continued to talk to each other, it dawned on him that he wasn't mistaken and that the man really was him, but from the future. He stated that the two had the time of their lives, recounting events that had happened in the past. He claims that the older version of him was about 70 years old and had the same tattoo that he has, but that it had faded quite a bit. He happened to have his phone with him, and so he took a video of him and his alternate self standing arm in arm and comparing their tattoo. It's theorized that since the older version of Hawkin would have already experienced the strange event, he would have known exactly where to be and at exactly what time when the younger version of himself would be going through the same experience. And so he was able to meet up with himself, only as the older version, whereas he would have experienced the event from the other perspective the first time around. The theory holds then that the younger Hawkin will someday be in the future and need to be in the exact same spot at that exact time to meet the next younger version of himself. Many people have claimed that Hawkin merely faked the event as a hoax, but he maintains that it really did happen, and no evidence has been found to the contrary, other than the man in the video potentially being his dad, of course. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.